There's someone in your life right now who knows exactly how to make you feel guilty, and the terrifying part, they're not a stranger, they're not some villain you can spot from a mile away. They sit at your dinner table, they know your childhood wounds. They've watched you grow up, and they've been using that information quietly, carefully, patiently for years. Machiavelli once wrote something that most people aren't ready to hear. He said that the most dangerous enemies are not the ones who hate you openly. The most dangerous ones are the ones who love you just enough to keep you close. Let that sink in for a second, because what I'm about to tell you isn't comfortable. It's not the kind of thing people talk about at family gatherings, but it's real, it's deeply, psychologically real. And if you've ever walked away from a family conversation feeling drained, confused, or somehow like you did something wrong when you know you didn't, then this video isn't just for you. This video is about you, about what's been happening around you, and about why you've been too loyal to see it clearly. There are 4 types of family members that Machiavelli, if he were alive today, would tell you to keep at a careful strategic distance. Not because family doesn't matter, but because sometimes the people closest to us have learned exactly how to use that closeness as a weapon. And before we even get to the first type, I need you to understand something about human behavior, something that most people go their entire lives without realizing. People don't usually manipulate because they're evil. They manipulate because they're afraid. Carl Jung talked about the shadow self, that dark, hidden part of the human psyche that we refuse to look at directly. Every person has wounds, unresolved pain, things they never processed. And when those wounds don't get healed, they don't just disappear. They transform. They turn into patterns, behaviors, survival mechanisms. The person who was neglected as a child learns to control others to feel safe. The person who was never seen learns to perform, to put on masks, to get attention. It's not random, it's deeply subconscious, and in your family, those patterns have been running silently, like background software for generations. Now let's talk about the first one, and I want you to pay close attention because this one is the hardest to see. It's the hardest because this person genuinely believes they love you. The first family member you must never fully trust is the one who turns your vulnerability into ammunition. You know this person, you've opened up to them before. Maybe it was a hard night. Maybe you were going through something, a breakup, a failure, a moment of doubt, and you let your guard down. You told them something real, something that cost you something to say out loud. And in that moment, they seemed caring, attentive, safe. They nodded slowly. They said the right things. They held the information like they were holding something precious. But here's what most people never realize. That information didn't disappear. It got filed away, stored somewhere in the back of a mind that is far more strategic than it appears. And the next time there was tension, the next time you disagreed, or set a limit, or started to pull away, that information came back. Not always directly, sometimes it was subtle. A comment at a family dinner, a concerned remark in front of other people, a joke that wasn't quite a joke. And suddenly, without fully understanding how, you felt exposed, embarrassed, like something was wrong with you. That's not love. That's leverage. And Machiavelli understood this at a level that most people find uncomfortable to accept. In The Prince, he wrote that the people who control others don't do it through brute force. They do it through information, through knowing just enough about you to make you feel like you need them, like you owe them, like leaving would cost you too much. Imagine this, you're at a family gathering, you're feeling good about something in your life, genuinely good. And then, in the middle of a conversation, this person says something, it's small, casual, almost offhand, but it references something you told them in a private moment, something you never meant to become public. And just like that, the room shifts, the air changes, and you spend the rest of the night not feeling good about your life anymore. You spend it feeling like you have something to explain. The person who stores your vulnerabilities is not keeping them for safekeeping. They're keeping them as insurance. Think about a specific moment in your life, a time when you told a family member something private, something you weren't proud of, and later somehow that thing became part of the narrative they used to describe you, to others, To you, to anyone who would listen. Oh, you know how they are. Remember what happened last time. I'm just worried about you. It sounds like concern, it feels like care, but underneath it, there's a structure, a quiet architecture of control, and the most devastating part, you feel guilty for questioning it, because they're family, because you've been taught that loyalty means staying, that love means forgiving everything. But Machiavelli would tell you, and so would Nietzsche in his brutally honest way, that the willingness to be used is not virtue. It's a failure of self-respect disguised as loyalty. Now let's move to the second type. And this one might be the most psychologically complex of all four. The second family member you must never fully trust is the one who never lets you succeed without making you feel small about it. You know who I'm talking about. The one who, when something good happens in your life, doesn't quite celebrate with you. There's always something, a hesitation, a but, a subtle redirect. That's great, but are you sure you're ready? I'm happy for you, but just be careful. I mean, it sounds good, but, and you leave the conversation not feeling excited anymore. You feel uncertain, smaller, like maybe you were getting ahead of yourself. That is not accidental. Carl Jung had a concept called projection, where we unconsciously take the things we can't accept about ourselves and project them onto the people around us. The family member who can't let you shine isn't doing it because they hate you. They're doing it because your success is a mirror. And what it reflects back at them is unbearable. It shows them a life they didn't choose, potential they didn't pursue, risks they were too afraid to take, and rather than deal with that, rather than sit inside that discomfort, they manage it by managing you. And here's what makes this so psychologically dangerous. They're usually not even aware they're doing it. That's what makes it so hard to name, because when you try to describe it to someone else, you sound paranoid. They said they were happy for you, right? So what's the problem? The problem is what wasn't said. The energy in the room, the flicker of something dark behind their eyes before they compose themselves into a smile. The way the conversation shifted, just slightly, away from your win and back to something more comfortable for them. Here's what I want you to actually feel for a moment. Think about the last time something genuinely good happened in your life. A promotion, a relationship, a decision you finally made after years of hesitation. Now think about who you called first, and think about how you felt after that call. Were you more excited or less? Because that answer, that single emotional data point, tells you more about that relationship than years of analysis ever could. Machiavelli called this type of threat the most insidious, the one who undermines you while appearing to support you. He understood that true power doesn't always attack openly. Sometimes it works quietly, slowly, over years, like water eroding stone. And by the time you realize what's happened, you've spent years dimming your own light to make someone else more comfortable. Nietzsche would say this even more bluntly. He would call it ressentiment, that deep, festering resentment that masquerades as concern. The ones who say they love you while secretly hoping you don't go too far, because if you go too far, you leave them behind, and being left behind. To someone whose identity depends on keeping the family structure exactly as it is, that is a kind of death. You have to understand something. Staying small to keep the peace is not love. It's a slow erasure of yourself, and the family member who benefits from your smallness, whether they know it or not, is not your ally. They are the invisible ceiling above your life. Now, we're at the halfway point of this video, and I need you to stay with me, because what comes next is where things get genuinely uncomfortable. The next two types of family members are ones that most people, even intelligent, self-aware people, almost never identify, because they're disguised in the most convincing way possible. They're disguised as the ones who love you the most. The third family member you must never fully trust is the martyr, the one who has sacrificed everything for you and wants you to know it every single day. You've felt this weight before, the weight of someone else's sacrifice placed quietly but deliberately on your shoulders. I gave up everything for this family. Do you have any idea how much I've done for you? After everything I've been through, it doesn't even have to be said out loud. Sometimes it's in the sigh, the look, The way they grow quiet when you make a choice they didn't approve of. The way a whole room can feel heavy just because they walked into it carrying that invisible ledger of everything they've given and everything they believe you owe, and you feel it, that invisible debt, that emotional account that never seems to balance no matter how much you give back. This is one of the oldest and most powerful psychological mechanisms in human relationships, and Machiavelli, who studied power in its rawest form, would recognize this immediately, because the martyr doesn't need a throne to rule. They use guilt as a crown, and it's extraordinarily effective because guilt bypasses logic. You can know intellectually that you are not responsible for someone else's choices, but when that guilt is activated, especially by someone you love, especially someone who has genuinely struggled, it doesn't feel intellectual. It feels like a physical weight in your chest, behind your eyes, in the way you can't fully enjoy anything without thinking of them. Picture this. You get some good news, life-changing news, and for about 30 seconds you feel purely, completely happy, and then without being summoned, without being invited, their face appears in your mind, their voice, the way they looked last time you disappointed them, and just like that, the joy has a shadow in it, a caveat, a condition. That is not a coincidence, that is years of conditioning. That is what happens when someone has made their pain the background noise of your entire emotional life. This is not an accident, even when it's unconscious. Even when the martyr genuinely believes their own narrative, the function of that behavior is control. Because as long as you feel indebted, you will never fully leave. You will never fully grow. You will never make a decision that prioritizes yourself without first filtering it through the question, but what about them? The Stoics had a concept that addresses this directly. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the discipline of desire, about learning to separate what is truly yours to carry from what has been placed on you by others. Epictetus, who was literally a slave before he became one of history's greatest philosophers, understood something profound, that the chains people carry are mostly invisible, mostly psychological, mostly handed to them by people who were also once chained. You are not responsible for the choices other people made, even if those choices were made in your name, even if they were made because of you. Another person's sacrifice, genuine or performed, does not create a debt you owe with your own life. Full stop. No asterisk. No exception for family. But the martyr needs you to believe otherwise, because without that belief, their power dissolves completely. Now, the fourth type, and this one, slow down for this one, really slow down, because this is the one that will change how you see everything. Not just your family, everything. The fourth family member you must never fully trust is the peacemaker, who is actually a spy. Every family has one, the person who positions themselves as the neutral one. The one who stays out of conflicts, the one who just wants everyone to get along. They float between factions, they talk to everyone, they seem warm, open, non-threatening. When there's a conflict between you and someone else in the family, they show up caring, gentle, and say, "I just want to understand your perspective." And you tell them, because they seem safe, because they seem like the one person who isn't taking sides. But here's what most people never realize. The peacemaker knows everything about everyone, and that information doesn't stay neutral. It moves, it gets shared carefully, selectively, strategically, in ways that maintain a very specific balance of power, not your power. There's Machiavelli devoted significant thought to this archetype. He understood that the person who appears to have no agenda is often the one with the most sophisticated agenda of all, because overt power is visible. It can be resisted. But the power of the person who seems to have none, who seems only to mediate, only to care, that power is nearly invisible, and invisible power is the most dangerous kind. Think about it. Who does the peacemaker really protect? Not you, not the people in conflict. They protect the system, the status quo, the existing order of the family, however dysfunctional it might be. Because if real resolution happened, if real honesty was spoken, if people actually dealt with what was underneath the surface, the peacemaker's role would become unnecessary. And for someone whose entire identity is built around being needed, around being the one everyone turns to, that is absolutely unacceptable. So they keep the tension alive, subtly, a word here, a concerned phone call there, a piece of information shared with the wrong person at precisely the right time. They don't cause the fire, they just keep fanning it quietly, gently, almost lovingly to make sure it never quite goes out, because as long as there's conflict, there's a need for a peacemaker. And as long as there's a need for a peacemaker, they matter, they're central, they're indispensable. Jung would call this the shadow of the caretaker archetype, the healer whose healing keeps people sick, the helper whose help maintains dependency. And the reason it's so hard to see is because the surface behavior is genuinely warm. They do care in their own deeply complicated way. But underneath the care is a need, deep, unconscious, relentless, to be the one who holds the center, to be the gravitational force that everything else orbits around. And here's the part that will genuinely unsettle you if you're paying attention. The false peacemaker in a family doesn't just know your secrets, they know everyone's secrets. They have a complete, private map of every wound, every resentment, every unspoken grievance in the family. And they use that map, not always maliciously, but always strategically, to position themselves exactly where they need to be. They are never in danger because they have leverage on everyone, including you. Now here's where I need to say something that complicates everything you've just heard. And I'm saying it because I don't want you to walk away from this feeling superior or righteous or cold. The people I've described, the one who stores your vulnerability, the one who can't let you shine, the martyr, the false peacemaker, they are all in pain, real, unprocessed, generational pain. They didn't invent these patterns in a vacuum. They were handed them by their own parents, who were handed them by theirs, in an unbroken chain that goes back further than any of us can trace. This is what Jung meant by the ancestral unconscious. We carry patterns we didn't choose. We run programs we didn't write. The woman who turns love into control was probably never loved without conditions herself. The man who can't celebrate your success was probably never celebrated. The martyr learned early that the only way to be valued was to suffer visibly. The false peacemaker grew up in chaos and discovered that information was the only form of safety available to them that doesn't make what they do okay, not even slightly, but it makes it human. And understanding that difference between what someone does and why they do it is one of the most psychologically mature and genuinely difficult things a person can develop. Because here's the real insight Machiavelli was pointing at, the one underneath all the strategy and calculation. He wasn't saying don't love your family, he was saying see them clearly, because the opposite of clear seeing isn't love, it's illusion, and illusions, no matter how warm and familiar they feel, will eventually cost you something real, your peace, your growth, your sense of who you actually are, outside the role this family assigned to you before you were old enough to question it. The Stoics called it apatheia, not apathy, but freedom from the reactive emotions that cloud your judgment. The ability to see a situation for what it is without being dragged entirely into its emotional undertow. To love someone and still see them clearly. To care without being controlled by that care. To stay in a relationship with your eyes fully open rather than beautifully, comfortably closed. That is the balance Machiavelli, in his cold, unsentimental, ruthlessly honest way, was really asking us to find. Not cynicism, not emotional detachment, not the calculated coldness of someone who trusts no one, just clarity. The quiet, grounded, sometimes devastating clarity of a person who sees things as they are. And here's what I need you to actually hear. Not just process intellectually, but feel every single person in your family is playing a role. And so are you. That role was assigned before you were old enough to question it. The responsible one. The rebellious one. The caretaker. The problem child. The golden child. The invisible one. These roles are maintained, unconsciously, collectively, because the system needs them. Because families, like all power structures, seek stability above everything else. And the way they maintain that stability is by keeping each person fixed in their assigned position. Predictable, manageable, known. But you are not a role, you are not a function in someone else's emotional system. And the moment you start behaving like something other than what the family assigned you, the moment you start choosing differently, thinking differently, wanting a life that looks nothing like what was expected, the system pushes back, hard. Not because the family is evil, but because systems resist disruption. That is simply what systems do. They self-correct, they rebalance, they apply pressure to the element that is moving out of formation. And the people I've described in this video, the four types, they are often the pressure, the enforcers of the system. Not by conscious design, but by psychological function. Their patterns, their behaviors, their unconscious manipulations, all of it works to keep you in place, to keep the family structure intact, to make sure the center holds. But the center was never yours to hold. You didn't come into this world to maintain someone else's emotional equilibrium. You didn't survive everything you've survived, every hard year, every quiet doubt, every moment you almost gave up, but didn't just to keep playing a part in a script you never agreed to. Machiavelli ends The Prince with an idea that most readers overlook because they're too focused on the power and the strategy. He ends with a quiet, almost melancholy reflection on fortune, on how much of human life is controlled by forces we didn't choose and can barely name. And the implied question underneath all of it is this: given that, what do you do? How do you live? How do you move through a world and a family that will always have its own agenda for you? His answer, stripped of all the political language, is deceptively simple. You see clearly, you act deliberately. You stop confusing familiarity with safety, and you stop confusing discomfort with betrayal. Because setting a boundary with a family member is not betrayal. It is not coldness. It is not ingratitude. It is the quiet, radical act of a person who has finally decided that their own inner life is worth protecting, and dignity, real dignity, the kind that doesn't need anyone's permission or approval, is something no one can hand you. Not your parents, not your siblings, not the family elder. Everyone is too afraid to question. It is something you choose, sometimes in the face of guilt, sometimes in the face of anger, sometimes in the face of the very people who raised you and love you, and are still, even now, trying to keep you exactly where they need you to be. Here is what I want to leave you with. Now that you see it, really see it, you can't unsee it. The dynamics that felt like normal family life will start to reveal their shape. The conversations that felt like love will start to show their hidden architecture. The guilt that felt like conscience will start to feel like something that was installed in you, not something that belongs to you. That's uncomfortable, I know it is. But discomfort is not always a sign that something is wrong. Sometimes it's a sign that something finally, quietly, irreversibly is becoming clear. Most people go their entire lives being loved by the wrong version of the people around them. Not because love was absent, but because no one, not them, not you, not the family, ever had the courage to look beneath the surface of it. You just did. And if you're the kind of person who pays close attention to the patterns underneath behavior, to the silence underneath words, to the architecture underneath relationships, then you already know there's more to see. Most people scroll past this kind of truth without stopping. You didn't. That says something about you. Remember what it says.